Fascism ever comes to America, it'll come in the name of liberalism.
Manning Johnson was a Negro, and he was also a member of the Communist Party. He joined the party as a young man because he honestly believed that the communists were trying to improve the conditions of his people. He was a dedicated communist. But after many years, Manning Johnson finally came to the realization that the communists weren't the least bit interested in improving the conditions of the Negro people. He discovered that instead they were merely planning to use his people, and these are his words, to use them as cannon fodder in a bloody revolution to destroy America. As early as 1928, the communists declared that the racial differences among our people constituted the weakest and most vulnerable point in our social fabric. By constantly probing and straining at this one spot, they calculated that eventually the cloth could be torn apart and that Americans could be divided, weakened, and perhaps even set against each other in open combat. We must not be led into placing the blame for the riots, the civil disorders, on the Negro people of our nation. Even those few who are promoting hatred and violence in the black communities are not themselves the cause. They're merely being used by forces far bigger than they are to promote the violent phase of the revolution in America. Hoping to avoid further violence and bloodshed, the public is to be pressured into accepting measures that will move the country gradually and legally toward communism, but without calling it that. The strategy of the proletarian revolution calls for the quiet conversion of our government into a communist regime, but under the banner of socialism. The new program of the Communist Party on this subject has this to say. The term socialism describes but the first stage of a new society that in its full development is called communism. Socialism is a transitional stage. The building of socialism is the communist revolution in America. It represents the process whereby our country can be moved gradually toward communism without the people even being aware of it. They have one and only one solution for all problems: more government, and then more and more until it's total government. Total government is communism. We must not be fooled into thinking that the causes of our civil turmoil are such things as poverty, poor housing, lack of education, and similar social or economic factors. As a matter of fact, most of today's self-styled revolutionaries, black and white, come from good homes, could earn better than average incomes if they wanted to work. And in fact, they're products of some of the finest institutions of higher learning. We mustn't resort to violence either as a means of furthering political or social goals. And we must do everything humanly possible to discourage others from doing so. We must support our local police. Nothing can be quite so damaging to police morale and efficiency as converting every arrest into a trial of the policeman instead of the criminal. Now, in passing, ladies and gentlemen, you may have wondered why the Communist Party has been a staunch supporter of the drive to place a black studies curriculum into our high schools and colleges. Well, the reason becomes obvious the minute you take a look at the textbooks and the study guides. Under the guise of academic balance, these courses have become a brilliant device for conditioning young people to accept still one more part of the total program for revolution. We must discover the identity of those individuals, both above and below, who consciously are furthering the communist program for revolution, and then remove them from their positions of trust and leadership. Now, of course, the minute you begin to think along these lines, you'll become the target of a whole barrage of attacks. You'll be called a right-wing extremist, a fascist, or at least a dictator. Some years ago, I happened to attend a meeting where several anti-communist refugees from behind the Iron Curtain were called upon to relate their personal experiences. One of the refugees spoke up and he said, "You know, I came to America expecting to find a nation of free men, but instead, I find exactly the same thing. Everywhere I look, I see men and women who know that communists are making headway in this country. They know that something must be done and that someone must stand up to them. But they themselves do nothing. They remain silent because they're afraid that if they speak out or take a stand publicly, it'll be bad for business. They may lose a client. They may even lose their jobs. If communism should ever come to America, we'll face more death, destruction, and human suffering than any people in history has ever faced at the hands of their invading conquerors. It's literally a question of life and death for all of us. And it's about time the American people began to face up to that fact and to act accordingly.
Soviets used the phrase ideological subversion. What do they mean by it?
Only about 15% of time, money, and manpower is spent on espionage as such. The other 85% is a slow process which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many years? Because this is the minimum number of years which requires to educate one generation of students exposed to the ideology of the enemy. In other words, Marxism-Leninism ideology is being pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations of American students without being challenged or counterbalanced by the basic values of Americanism, American patriotism. The result you can see, most of the people who graduated in the 60s, dropouts or half-baked intellectuals, are now occupying the positions of power in the government, civil service, business, mass media, educational system. You are stuck with them. You cannot get rid of them. They are contaminated. They are programmed to think and react to certain stimuli in a certain pattern. You cannot change their mind, even if you expose them to authentic information, even if you prove that white is white and black is black. You still cannot change the basic perception and the logic of behavior. In other words, these people, the process of demoralization is complete and irreversible. To get rid society of these people, you need another 20 or 15 years to educate a new generation of patriotically minded and common sense people who would be acting in favor and in the interests of the United States society. The demoralization process in the United States is basically completed already. For the last 25 years, actually it's overfulfilled, because demoralization now reaches such areas where previously not even Comrade Andropov and all his experts would even dream of such a tremendous success. Most of it is done by Americans to Americans. Even if you start right now, here, this minute, you start educating new generation of Americans, it will still take you 15 to 20 years to turn the tide of ideological perception of reality back to normalcy and patriotism. Most of the American politicians, media, and educational system trains another generation of people who think they are living at a peacetime. False. The United States is in a state of war, undeclared total war against the basic principles and the foundations of this system. And the initiator of this war is not Comrade Andropov, of course. It's the system. However ridiculous it may sound, the world communist system or the world communist conspiracy, whether I scare some people or not, I don't give a hoot. You have literally several years to live on unless the United States wake up. The time bomb is ticking. With every second, the disaster is coming closer and closer. Unlike myself, you will have nowhere to defect to. This is it. This is the last country of freedom and possibility.
Okay, so what do we do? What is your recommendation to the American people?
There must be a very strong national effort to educate people in in the spirit of real patriotism, number one. Number two, to explain them the real danger of socialist, communist, whatever, welfare state, big brother government. If people will fail to grasp the impending danger of that development, nothing ever can help United States. You may kiss goodbye to your freedom, including freedoms to homosexuals, to prison inmate. All this freedom will vanish, evaporating in 5 seconds, including your precious lives. Educate yourself. Understand what's going on around you. You are not living at a time of peace. You are in a state of war. And you have precious little time to save yourself. It's simplistic. I know it sounds unpleasant. I know Americans don't like to listen to things which are unpleasant. But I have defected not to tell you the stories about such idiocies as microfilm, James Bond type, espionage. This is garbage. I have come to talk about survival. It's a question of survival of this system. I am now in your boat. If we sing together, we'll sing beautifully together. There is no other place on this planet to defect to.
Probably the end of 2015, I started to notice infiltrators coming into the movement, which is already, it's been like this for a long time. But I actually started to see it all online, making fake pages, feeding off our emotions, trying to get us involved in things that we're not involved in, trying to get us to believe in things that we weren't familiar with, basically pushing us or to be more left and democratic. A lot of the black leaders are straight leading us to our demise. They have us working, doing their dirty work. For us, their dirty work, I mean the far left's dirty work. Because how they're getting us is they're playing us emotionally. And they're basically saying how racist and how messed up guys on the far right and the neo-Nazis are. So they're getting the gays, they're getting people of other cultures, the people of the far left. I'm talking about the far left. I'm getting somewhere with this. They're getting gays, they're getting black people, anybody who doesn't like Donald Trump, and they want us to be a part of their side. What I'm trying to get the black population to understand and understand, and this is critical, is the movement has been compromised. Okay, everybody needs to know that the RBG movement has been compromised. BLM, if you are not caught up to BLM, it is not even a real black organization. It never was. I actually feel bad that I've been keeping a lot of this information cooped up for so long, but I just felt like, it wasn't getting anywhere. There is hidden powers who are controlling the narrative, and they're brainwashing you to feel a certain way about the system, about white people, about every race, and about yourselves. Do not let these beasts, do not let these evil people do this. And I'm not talking about any particular race, man. You got black people, man. Like I said, the movement has been compromised. There is no black RBG movement. If you were claiming BLM, you were real sad, motherfucker. This is all a big setup. It's huge propaganda. The biggest propaganda. The people on the left are using us. The Democratic Party are using black people to fight their war with Antifa. It's getting very, very deep. If you don't know who Antifa is, look Antifa up. Basically a terrorist group, but they're basically like a militant group, and they're anti-fascist. That's what Antifa stands for. It stands for anti-fascist. And the media is downplaying this group. They're not telling people about this group. And what they want to do is they want to take the guns away from the people on the far right. Their whole plan is to even a playing field, because the people on the far right, they deal with guns. They have all the guns. And right now, as it stands, The people on the left are set to get slaughtered. That's why they're pushing gun laws. You think I'm a big Trump fan? No. I'm just letting y'all know. I'm just giving the information as I get it. In Las Vegas, that country music show or whatever in Las Vegas, it was pretty much all white people. That was a direct hit. That was a direct hit from the left party. I don't know if you can say Antifa did it, but it was a direct hit from the left going against the right. What I want black people, my people, to understand is don't get involved in something that has nothing to do with y'all. As much as you feel however you feel about the right, they are straightforward. The people on the left are lying to you and trying to get you to do that dirty work and get slaughtered. And they're going to use you now, and emotionally they're going to get you attached to their little movement, Antifa and all this bullshit.
If this country doesn't give us what we want, then we will burn down this system and replace it, all right?
America is under threat from a radical organization that's terrorizing its citizens. But it's not a right-wing fascist group like the mainstream media claims. It's actually a left-wing fascist organization known as Black Lives Matter.
Seattle's pledged to defund its police department by 50%, even including a proposal to remove 911 dispatchers from police control.
Joe Biden said he's absolutely on board with defunding the police. Listen closely.
Yes, absolutely.
Hello, you've reached 911. I'm sorry that there is no one here to answer your emergency call, but leave a message and we'll get back to you as soon as we can.
Top story takes us to Portland, Oregon. Yeah, another liberal city run by liberals for decades. Unlawful violent riots are turning the city into a literal disaster area. And yeah, it looks like a war zone like other places. For months, Portland has been ripped apart by a group of malicious so-called anarchists. 3 federal courthouses have now been damaged on multiple occasions. The Hatfield courthouse was firebombed. The U.S. Custom House was vandalized. Police were attacked with lasers. Several officers now assaulted with sledgehammers. Stores were broken into. Buildings were set on fire. This is insane. We're talking about dozens and dozens of assaults, arsons, graffiti, looting, vandalism, violence, you name it. So-called demonstrators even attempting to set up their own autonomous zone, just like the Chop, Chaz, Summer of Love, Spaghetti Potluck Dinner Zone in Seattle. And so far, businesses in the downtown area of Portland, they have reported at least $23 million in financial losses. Here's just a small sample of what is taking place there on a daily basis. Take a look. This has now been going on for more than 6 straight weeks across the country. 12 dead police officers, 1,200 injured, and rocks and bricks and bottles of Molotov cocktails. You want to be a cop in Portland tonight? Not only are Portland's far-left city leaders letting this happen, they're actively shunning any and all help from President Trump, just like Seattle, just like Chicago, and just like New York. Now, how have things worked out in those 3 liberal-run cities for decades? In fact, when the DHS deployed federal law enforcement officials to protect the city's federal buildings, they were accused of, quote, acting like an occupying army. Mayor Ted Wheeler demanded that the federal agents, quote, follow local rules, all while rioters were acting with impunity. Wheeler went on to then tweet, the best thing they can do is stay inside their building or leave Portland altogether. And in the meantime, I asked them to clean up the graffiti on local federal facilities.
Welcome